It was late. Later than it should have been. The night felt heavier, more suffocating than usual. In the darkness, the old house groaned, shifting with age, its floorboards creaking as if it too were restless. It was the kind of night when the silence was too thick, almost suffocating, hanging in the air like an ominous presence. And then at the top of the stairs sat Keith, an 8-year-old boy, trying to fall asleep, but unable to shake the unease that had settled deep within him. His younger brother Michael lay fast asleep beside him, but Keith was far from peaceful. Keith tossed and turned in his bed, staring at the ceiling, his thoughts restless. The clock ticked slowly, the seconds stretching like an eternity. The air around him felt wrong, too still, too quiet. Keith had always been the braver of the two brothers. He was supposed to be the protector, the one who kept the nightmares at bay. But tonight something was different. Something gnawed at him, something intangible yet undeniable. The house felt as if it was holding its breath, waiting. He glanced over at Michael, still sound asleep, blissfully unaware of the creeping dread that had started to gnaw at Keith's mind. He could hear it now, the faintest whisper, as if carried by the wind. Keith froze. Was that his mother's voice, calling his name? He strained his ears, trying to make out the sound. It was there, just barely audible, but unmistakable. The soft, melodic tone of his mother's voice, calling his name. But it wasn't right. The pitch was off, the way it echoed, the way it seemed to reverberate through the house. It felt wrong. Wrong in a way that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. Keith, Mikey. The voice floated up from the dark hallway below. Keith's heart pounded in his chest. It was his mother's voice, but it had a hollow, unsettling quality to it. The kind of voice that made your skin crawl, like the whisper of something just out of reach, something unnatural. Keith felt the cold tendrils of fear creep up his spine. He knew he shouldn't go down there. He knew something wasn't right, but curiosity gnawed at him. His mother needed him. He couldn't just stay up here, could he? The voice called again, more urgently this time, almost pleading. Keith, Mikey, please, come downstairs. It was then that Keith's instincts began to scream at him. The voice sounded desperate, but something about it still felt wrong. His feet were glued to the floor, his body paralyzed by an unknown fear. His heart raced, and for a moment, he wanted to pull the covers over his head and hide. But the voice, his mother's voice, pulled at him. He couldn't ignore it. He had to check. Keith swung his legs over the side of the bed, careful not to wake Michael. He crept toward the door, the cold wooden floor creaking beneath his feet. He slowly opened the door to the dark hallway. The house was eerily silent now, save for the faint sound of his own breathing. He stepped into the hallway, his bare feet silent against the floorboards, as if the house itself was watching him, waiting for something to happen. He stood at the top of the stairs, listening, straining to hear any further sign of movement. And there it was again, clearer this time, louder. The voice calling from the bottom of the stairs. Keith, Mikey, come here now. It was so clear, so real, and yet so wrong. It was almost as if the house itself had become something else, something ancient, something that knew too much. Keith's heart skipped a beat. He glanced down the stair into the pitch-black void below. The darkness at the bottom of the stairs seemed to stretch into infinity. It felt alive, like something was waiting just beyond the edge of the light. The stairs themselves creaked under the weight of something unseen, and Keith couldn't help but feel a chill creep up his spine. He stepped forward, his feet heavy, his breath shallow. The air was cold now, colder than before. The darkness below seemed to reach out for him, pulling him toward it with an unnatural force. With each step the silence deepened. The house was holding its breath. Keith reached the bottom of the stairs, and there in the corner of the hallway, standing motionless against the far wall, was a figure, a woman. She was standing perfectly still, her back turned toward him. The figure was tall, but it was hard to make out any details. She didn't move. She didn't even breathe. The room seemed to grow colder, the air thick and suffocating. Keith's eyes narrowed as he tried to make sense of what he was seeing. "Mom?" Keith called out, his voice trembling. The woman slowly turned her head, and Keith's blood ran cold. Her face was pale, too pale, almost ghostly, and her eyes, those eyes, they were black as coal, hollow and empty. Her smile stretched across her face, but it wasn't a smile. It was something twisted, something wrong, as if it were pulled too wide, forcing the skin of her face to stretch unnaturally. Her eyes locked onto Keith's, and the smile grew even wider, stretching farther than a smile should ever go. It wasn't human. It wasn't anything he had ever seen before. "Come closer, sweetie," the woman whispered, her voice now cold, devoid of warmth, empty and hollow. Keith felt a shiver run down his spine. His instincts screamed at him to run, to turn and flee, but his body refused to move, frozen in place by the woman's gaze. Her smile, it was the smile of something ancient, something that had been waiting for years, maybe centuries. Keith stumbled backward, his heart racing, but his feet wouldn't obey. He was trapped, standing at the bottom of the stairs, his body paralyzed by an overwhelming terror that threatened to swallow him whole. "Keith, Mikey, come here," the woman said again, her voice like the cold wind that whispers through the trees at night. The sound echoed through Keith's mind, reverberating in his skull like a terrible drumbeat. Keith tried to scream, but no sound escaped. His throat was tight, constricted, as if the air itself was pressing against him. His legs buckled, and he collapsed to the floor, his hands shaking uncontrollably. In that moment, Keith realized something horrifying, something that turned his blood to ice. The woman at the bottom of the stairs wasn't his mother. She wasn't human. She was something else, something that had taken the form of his mother's voice, the shape of a woman, but something dark, something ancient, a being that had been waiting for the right moment to make its presence known. As Keith tried to back away, his mind racing, the woman stepped forward, her movements slow, deliberate. Her eyes glowed faintly in the dark, and Keith could see the gleam of her smile widening, stretching farther still. She was coming for him, slowly, relentlessly. She moved with the certainty of something that knew it would never be stopped. Keith scrambled up, his heart pounding, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He turned and fled up the stairs, his feet pounding against the wooden steps. He slammed the bedroom door shut behind him, the sound of the lock clicking into place filling the room. He looked over at Michael, still asleep in his bed, completely unaware of the terror that had just been a mere room away. Keith's heart was still racing, his mind still reeling from the encounter. Keith didn't know what he had seen. He didn't know what had been lurking at the bottom of those stairs, but he knew it wasn't anything human. It had waited for him. It had called to him, and now it was gone. Or was it? The silence in the room was deafening, but Keith knew the silence wasn't real. It was just the calm before the storm. The house had become something else, something alive, and it would never let him forget what he had seen. The footsteps had stopped, the voice had faded, but Keith knew it was only a matter of time before it came back.